All right, we have reached week 9 of college football. I can't believe it. I feel like the first 8 weeks have just flown by, but this weekend is another weekend that a lot of people are calling a sleepy weekend of college football. And if you watch this channel for a while, you know that I don't believe in sleepy weekends. I think there are great games every single weekend, and I think it's going to be the same for this week. And so we have a lot of games to break down. But first, please like, comment, subscribe. It means a lot to me and this channel. I put a lot of work into these videos, so I'd really appreciate it. Anyways, let's start with a massive SEC showdown in Death Valley. That's right, LSU is hosting the undefeated Texas A&M Aggies. And if you follow college football for a while, you know that this matchup always delivers something pretty wild. I mean, who can forget that 2018 7-overtime classic? One of the craziest games of the decade. This year is probably not going to reach that level of chaos, but it's setting up for another heavyweight battle. A&M comes into this one unbeaten, one of the last undefeated teams left in the country. And LSU, they're in full desperation mode here at home. And when you're desperate in Death Valley, the crowd shows up, especially at night. This is one of the toughest environments in college football to play, and A&M has already struggled to pull away in both of their road games this year already, both decided by a single possession. But here's the thing about A&M. They just keep finding ways to win. They can play multiple styles of ball, high-scoring shootouts, defensive battles, and they always just seem to adjust. LSU, on the other hand, they have a much more defined identity. They're leaning heavily on that defense. Blake Baker has turned that into an elite unit, and that's where LSU really hangs their hat. They'll try to let their defense keep them in this game long enough for the offense to just find enough points, maybe a key turnover or good field position to change the game. But that defense is about to face one of the most balanced offenses in the SEC and maybe the country. Texas A&M has been held under 30 points only one time all season, and that was against Auburn. Defense that's actually pretty similar in quality to LSU's, so that could be encouraging for LSU fans, especially if they get guys like Whit Weeks back in their lineup. That said, LSU's defense was not at its best last week. They gave up a bunch of chunk plays that you just can't afford in this kind of against this kind of offense. Even without Le'Veon Moss, A&M just has so many weapons. They can rotate backs, they can spread you out with elite wide receivers, and their quarterback, who is legitimately a Heisman contender, and he can make plays with his arm or his legs. And that's where I think the separation comes in this game. LSU's offense just has not been able to match that kind of explosiveness. The run game hasn't been efficient, and Nussmeier has been pretty inconsistent. But to be fair, last week was probably their best performance on offense, even in a loss. They had no turnovers, a balanced attack, and a bit more rhythm overall. If they keep trending upwards, they could find themselves some success here, honestly, against this A&M defense, which has been up and down at times. Still, when A&M's defense has given up points, it's usually to elite and dynamic offenses, and that's just not the way that LSU is built right now. If A&M can control the ball by running early, their secondary should be able to handle Nussmeier through the air. So I think Texas A&M pulls it out. If they don't, it's probably because of turnovers, penalties, or special teams lapses giving LSU short fields. A&M, they have had some discipline issues earlier in the season, and Death Valley has a way of making teams crack under pressure. But for now, I think the Aggies stay undefeated. Moving on now to Missouri versus Vanderbilt. And if you told me a few years ago that Vanderbilt versus Missouri is going to be a top 15 matchup, I would have called you crazy. But here we are, and somehow Vanderbilt is favored at home. College Game Day is going to be there. I'm going to be there at College Game Day. Honestly, though, after last weekend, it makes sense that Vanderbilt's favored. My entire perspective on both of these teams has kind of shifted a bit over the past few days. Let's start with Vanderbilt because the Commodores, they are legit. They proved that last week against LSU, just dominating that game from start to finish. I already thought that they were a good football team, but the performance made it clear that they are better than good. They are for real. They're balanced, they're physical, and they're playing with a level of confidence that I just haven't seen from them in years. Meanwhile, Missouri is a bit of a paper tiger. Last week, they barely escaped Jordan Hare with a win, and honestly, I feel like Auburn gave that game away more than Missouri won it. And what's concerning is that the same problems we've seen the last couple of weeks are really still there. The running game has been pretty underwhelming the past few weeks, even with two really talented backs. And when they're forced to throw, Bo Prabula just does not look comfortable at all. He's solid when everything's going to schedule, but once the pocket breaks down, the offense really stalls. Now, don't get me wrong, Missouri is still a really solid team. They're well coached. They've got enough talent to hang around with just about anybody, but I just don't think that they are a great team. And that's the difference here, because Vanderbilt is playing like a great team right now. Diego Pavia has been incredible, the offense is rolling, and the defense has quietly been one of the most disciplined in the SEC. I think this game ends up looking a lot like the Vanderbilt-LSU game, to be honest. Vanderbilt controls the line of scrimmage, they limit big plays, and they just slowly wear Missouri down. So give me the Commodores in this one at home and keep proving that last week was not a fluke. They are a real, legit team. Moving on to Ole Miss versus Oklahoma, and this game really stands out to me because of the matchups within it. You've got Lane Kiffin's explosive and unstoppable offense going up against Brent Venables' disciplined and impenetrable defense. And on the flip side, you've got an Ole Miss team that can't stop the run to save their lives going up against an Oklahoma team that can't run the ball to save their lives. So something has to give. Will Ole Miss make even Venables' defense look like Swiss cheese, or will Oklahoma continue to clamp down and prove that their defense can handle anybody, even this high-flying offense? And what about the run game? Will Oklahoma finally get something going on the ground against the defense that's really been gashed all season? Or will Ole Miss finally face a rushing attack weak enough for them to make stops and get off the field? This game has huge implications for both teams, not necessarily make or break, but definitely tone setting. And if you want to make it to Atlanta or keep your playoff hopes alive, you cannot afford to lose this game. It's in Norman. Oklahoma's favored, but honestly, I don't think they should be. I think Ole Miss matches up really well here. They finally, I think, will get some stops on the ground because this Oklahoma backfield just has not been good all year. And even if the Sooners do find a rhythm, it's not like they're suddenly going to be ripping off 10-yard runs. And look, I love John Mateer, but this Oklahoma offense has really struggled to stay consistent. They'll score some points in this one. I don't doubt that, but so will Ole Miss. We saw Texas hang 23 on this Oklahoma team, and this Ole Miss offense is far more dynamic than that. They made Georgia's defense look terrible, and maybe they are, but while I don't think they're going to completely shred Oklahoma the same way they did Georgia, I do think they'll move the ball consistently and score. So the real question is, can Oklahoma keep up? And I'm not really sure. This feels like a toss-up to me, but I'm rolling with Ole Miss. They're vulnerable for sure, but I just think that they are built to win this kind of matchup. And after what I saw in that Texas game, I cannot bring myself to pick Oklahoma here, so give me the Rebels. All right, moving on to Auburn versus Arkansas. And this one also has some really interesting matchups because you got an Arkansas team that has one of the most high-octane offenses in the country, a group that can score on literally anybody, but also a defense that can't stop anybody. And on the other side, you've got Auburn, a team with an elite defense, but an offense that just can't seem to get out its own way. So it's kind of the perfect storm here, strength versus strength, weakness versus weakness. Both these teams have been losing really close games lately, and both desperately need a win here to get them back on track. It's in Fayetteville. I'm rolling with the Hogs here. I don't think this will be a typical Arkansas-style shootout because Auburn's defense is just way too good for that. I think they're going to get more stops than most teams that face this Arkansas offense will. But on the flip side, I don't think that Auburn is suddenly going to wake up and look competent offensively just overnight. So Taylor Green, he's been phenomenal all year. I think he'll be the difference in this one. I see him making enough big plays and finally pulling Arkansas over that hump just to get their first conference win of the season. And honestly, this might end up being the nail in the coffin for Hugh Freeze. I do think it's going to be a closer game, but I've got the Razorbacks taking it at home. All right, now Alabama versus South Carolina. Not going to take long on this one. Yes, it's Cocktober. It's a home game for South Carolina. The atmosphere will be awesome, but the same problems that have plagued them all season are still there. The offense is not working. It's basically Lenore Sellers, occasionally Nick Harbor, and that's about it. And on defense, they may not even have Dylan Stewart, so you can't count on that either. Meanwhile, Alabama has been playing incredible football week after week. Ty Simpson is balling out. They've got a ton of wide receiver depth. The defense is playing well enough, and even though the run game has not been dominant, they just keep finding ways to win. South Carolina's crowd will be loud for sure, but talent and execution matter more than that, and Alabama's got both in spades. I love for South Carolina to pull the upset here, but I don't see it happening. Easy win for the Tide. Moving on to BYU versus Iowa State, and this one is a little more interesting. I haven't really been a big BYU believer all season. I've kind of just chalked up their success to an easy schedule, but after last weekend's statement win over Utah, I think it's time we start taking them seriously. This has all the makings of a classic Big 12 game where literally anything can happen. Iowa State comes into this one after back-to-back losses, and I'm a little lower on them than most people are. I like Rocco Becht, and I like the coaching staff, and they do get this one at home. They're even favored, but I just think that BYU might actually be legit. They've shown me far fewer weaknesses than Iowa State has, and if you look at common opponents, BYU has already beaten one of the teams that Iowa State lost to. Now, I don't put too much stock into that, especially since Iowa State also destroyed a team that BYU barely got past in multiple overtimes, but still, it is worth noting. That Utah win has really earned BYU a lot of equity and credibility for me, so I think I'm going to keep rolling with them for them to stay undefeated here. Give me BYU. Moving on to Houston versus Arizona State, and Houston's actually had a surprisingly good year this season. Outside of that one game against Texas Tech, which, to be fair, has been the story for just about everybody who's faced the Red Raiders this season, but not the team that they're facing in Arizona State. They actually beat Texas Tech. Sure, Tech was playing with their backup quarterback, but still, A solid win and one that really showed how dangerous this Sun Devils team can be when they're fully healthy. Now that Sam Levitt is back under center, Arizona State looks like a completely different team. And having Jordan Tyson, who, let's be honest, is basically an NFL player who still plays in college, just gives them a true game changer on that offense. Houston's been one of the better stories in college football this year, but I just don't think they're going to be winning on the road here. Arizona State looks sharp again, and I think that they continue the momentum, so give me the Sun Devils. Now let's talk about USF versus Memphis. It's a group of 5 battle that actually could literally decide a playoff spot. Navy might have something to say about that, but we'll talk about them later whenever they have another big matchup. But these teams are both really impressive. They both have wins over Power 4 opponents. USF has beaten Florida, and Memphis has beaten Arkansas. Unfortunately for Memphis, this game is even more of a must-win after that tough loss to UAB last week. They do have home field here, but I still like South Florida in this one. Their one loss came against Miami, and they look dominant in every other matchup they've played, including Boise State, North Texas. Both very impressive wins, and I think Alex Golesh has done an incredible job with this team, and Byron Brown continues to look like one of the best quarterbacks at the group of 5 level. I would have picked USF even if Memphis had not had lost last week, but after watching that game, I'm even more confident. I think the Bulls win this one, and they're well on their way to taking that playoff spot. All right, now let's talk about some upset alert games. These are games that I don't really want to break down fully, but they're still worth mentioning because they could bear some really crazy upsets, especially in this sleepy weekend. So let's start with Texas versus Mississippi State. And after watching Texas get completely outplayed by Kentucky last week, and honestly looked pitiful for most of the season outside of that Oklahoma game, I have to put them on upset alert here. Mississippi State has played better teams closer this season, and this one is in Starkville, so I could absolutely see the Bulldogs pulling this off outright. Now, I am going to still pick Texas. They've got more talent overall, but don't be shocked at all if Mississippi State pulls this one out. And on the upset alert meter, I'm putting this one at an 8 out of 10, so watch out, Longhorns. This could really happen. Moving on to Kentucky versus Tennessee, and this one is a rivalry game, and with Kentucky being at home, you can't rule anything out. We know the Wildcats have a really solid defense, and they're facing a Tennessee offense that's been explosive, but inconsistent. On the other side, Tennessee's defense has looked very vulnerable at times, so I could see Kentucky finding some success moving the ball here. Still, I think the Vols pull this one out, but I've got them on alert here. I'd say about 6 out of 10 on the upset alert meter. And then we got Michigan versus Michigan State, another rivalry game. And you know what that means? Anything can happen. Michigan's offense, they've been inconsistent all year, but they finally looked solid last week against Washington. Michigan State, on the other hand, just hasn't shown much at all. So I'm not too worried about the Wolverines here. But since it's a rivalry, I'll give it a 4 out of 10 on the upset alert scale. And last but not least, UCLA versus Indiana. And if you would have told me a few weeks ago that this game would even be on the upset alert meter, I would have laughed at you. But ever since they fired their head coach at UCLA, they've looked like a completely different team, picking up wins over Penn State, Maryland, Michigan State. So you got to take them for real here. Nico has really started to find his rhythm. The Bruins look rejuvenated. That said, they're facing one of the most complete and disciplined teams in the country in Indiana. The Hoosiers are better coached, they're better prepared, and just a better team across the board. I think Indiana handles their business here, but out of respect for UCLA's turnaround, I'll still put a 5 out of 10 on the upset alert meter here. That's all for this video, guys. I really hope you enjoyed, and have a great weekend. Peace.